Hey, remember that time a guy did a fantasy trilogy filled with visual effects and everybody loved it and they wanted more? But then he came back with a prequel trilogy filled with CGI and people were like, nope. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to part 4 of No CGI is Really Just Invisible CGI. I'm Jonas and I've been making CGI for film and TV for 19 years. Today we're looking at why CGI fell from grace in the first place and why studios think they have to lie about it. And I'll admit that maybe there is something to the whole too much CGI thing. I promise you I was gonna save the best for last, so today we're also taking a look at that one project that has more no CGI than any other.
But we're not using CGI in this one.
But first, let's start on a positive note for once. Here are some people who are not afraid to talk about CGI.
I mean, I wept when I was looking at the credits of the CGI team. I was just like, look at all these people that made this movie.
You guys have done such an extraordinary job. For those of you who haven't recently watched Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, watch it again just with the VFX in mind, and you will be blown away. It's truly a masterclass.
This is a shot we did practically. No, I'm just kidding. This is a CG shot.
Junior is not de-aging. So it's not my face and then they smoothed out. It's a 100% digital human.
Seth MacFarlane has repeatedly praised Framestore for their great work on his TED show. Juan Antonio Bayona makes no effort to hide that CGI is present throughout his Netflix drama Society of the Snow.
Absolutamente todos los fondos de la película están cambiados digitalmente. Y todos los fondos que se ven en la película son las montañas de los Andes.
Releasing several promos that celebrate the teamwork between stunts, special effects, visual effects, and even previs. That was great to hear, but quite frankly it also makes it all the more embarrassing to listen to those who are ashamed to talk about visual effects. Check this one out. Besides the more obvious use of computer animation, Gran Turismo also features green screen shots, crowds, stadiums, and environments. And as VFX supervisor Victor Müller says to Ian Fales from Befores and Afters, lots of shots with CG cars in live-action plates, and even completely digital shots. Neil Blomkamp has a history of making great-looking visual effects films, so it's no surprise he would repost the article about the great effects in Gran Turismo, repeatedly praising the visual effects team. But it gets weird when Sony releases their promo about the film, stating, no green screens. That's just how Neil Blomkamp rolls.
He wanted to make it really practical and shot.
The temptation is to go all digital. The cars could be animated. You could film the tracks as background plates and do digital cars. But in this case, everything is real.
Actors and directors are still at work when they give interviews, and sometimes it sounds almost as if they're reading from a script. This is Gran Turismo's production notes from the official press kit, and anyone from the trades who wanted to write about how the film was made would only have this to go on.
The temptation is to go all digital. You could film the tracks as background plates and do digital cars. But in this case, everything is real.
It's always a treat for an audience when something feels more real. Shooting this movie without green screens,
it's very practical. That's what I got from Neil when I met him, to make it as real as possible.
Well, it's funny because you hire a guy who's primarily like a sci-fi guy. And when we showed up on set, he just wanted everything to be real. He didn't want any CGI in this movie.
How did we get here? When I saw the Super Bowl trailer for Independence Day in 1996, the whole theater lost their minds over this one shot. But the days when you can impress the audience with a single shot like that are over. Computer graphics for movies in the 80s was very experimental, and the effects were supposed to stand out as obvious effect shots, but not in a bad way. The 90s gave us the revolutions we needed to get to where we are today, with Jurassic Park introducing photoreal creatures. Twister freed the camera by integrating 3D animations in completely uncontrolled camera moves. And the Star Wars Special Editions experimented with just how much you can alter footage that wasn't shot with visual effects in mind. The 2000s used this new tool to do a complete reboot of superhero movies, fantasy movies, action movies, period pieces, war movies, horror movies, science fiction, monster movies, and disaster movies. CGI was the new hot thing in filmmaking, and DVDs were loaded with bonus material boasting how extensive it was used. So far, people were very happy with how it was used to make new adventures possible and expand characters, story, and world building. The cinematic superhero universes exploded in the 2010s, and people were on board for the most part. Because these superhero comic book panels were never particularly grounded in reality, and they have never been faithfully put on screen before they could get the scope that only CGI could give them. But with a whole decade of digital effects used to turn every single summer blockbuster up to 11 with wall-to-wall spectacle, slowly we began to realize we'd seen it all. And the days when you can blow our socks off with a single shot like this are gone. CGI had no limits and filmmakers had learned that they could do whatever they want. But as it turns out, for some filmmakers, whatever they want isn't necessarily something we want to see.
I am directly below. Enemy scrotum.
And with some clear one-to-one examples of the animatronics predecessor being more popular with audiences than the new CGI version, the audience understandably started to notice how all movies look like CGI these days. And they wanted less of it. The problem is, that's not really how CGI looks. All the way back in the 90s, when you were busy talking about T2 and Jurassic Park, George Lucas slipped under your radar with the Radioland murders, secretly showing audiences the first seamless 3D set extensions that no one had any clue weren't filmed for real. The Young Indiana Jones Chronicles had more invisible digital effects than any average viewer would have been able to comprehend if you had told them, and laid the revolutionary groundwork for how movies have been made since and are still made to this day. Forrest Gump won the visual effects Oscar for its mostly invisible visual effects, and parallel to the revolution of CGI spectacle and magic, invisible CGI has been essential to both big-budget and low-budget movies for 3 full decades now. And there's no way filmmaking is letting go of it. Visual effects artists have been omitted from the credits since matte painting to maintain the illusion that everything was filmed for real. But it goes much deeper than that. For the train crash in The Fugitive, Warner Brothers were proud to use only a full-scale train and not cheat with any miniature work.
This is in the era before digital effects really were in their forte. And we decided in general that we would create a real train crash.
But the crash didn't go as planned and they had to resort to a visual effects combination of the full-scale train and miniature effects. But no one outside the production would ever know about it.
Well, we weren't allowed to talk about it and mention that there was visual effects on the movie. Warner Brothers had it in our contract because we did crash a train, but unfortunately, it didn't work. It jumped the track and dropped too early.
But hey, that miniature crash is still practical and not CGI, so it's a different conversation, right? Not really. The studio wanted you to believe that what they did was more real than all the miniature work and trick photography everyone else was using, so when they ended up using the same miniature effects and trick photography as everyone else, they lied.
We used an actual railroad. This was not miniatures. It was not trick photography.
So it was fairly easy for the studios to respond to the misconception that CGI looks like this by telling you what you want to hear.
Real sets. Practical effects.
There was a feeling when I was a kid, when I saw Star Wars for the first time, that it was all practical and real.
JJ's trying to make sure these movies have a physicality to them.
The ability to have an actual physical droid on set animating as he would, that was as real as anyone else. That was an incredible goal.
Industrial Light and Magic recently marked the anniversary of Steven Spielberg's Empire of the Sun by remembering the visual effects, which included miniatures, optical compositing, matte paintings, and probably the world's first CG formation of airplanes flying over Shanghai. The film's producer, Frank Marshall, literally the same day, celebrated the film as all real, no visual effects. This film is from 1987. Why lie about it now? It's not like you're boosting ticket sales. In The Revenant, Leonardo DiCaprio fights a completely realistic ILM bear in an incredible 4-minute one-shot, which should have put the final nail in the coffin for anyone who says CGI doesn't look real or scary, doesn't have weight, because short of fighting an actual bear, no practical filmmaking methods could ever produce a scene as real as this. 20th Century Fox celebrated this mind-blowing milestone in visual effects by going behind the scenes of the bear attack in a 2-minute promo titled Bear Attack Behind the Scenes. And it plays out like this.
The makeup in this movie is the most incredible makeup I've seen probably in my life.
The whole of Leo's body was covered with prosthetics.
Bear attacks his arm, so he had an appliance for his arm and also his hand, and his leg gets dislocated.
It took us 4.5 hours to apply.
All that matters is what they get on camera.
The makeup is so important. You could see the journey in his face.
Yeah, no, the promo titled Bear Attack Behind the Scenes doesn't actually show you in a single image how they filmed the bear attack, because then you would have seen this guy.
And then the bear scene, that was the best use of special effects I think I've ever seen.
He never lets me talk about how exactly he pulled this off.
Since the studio has all bragging rights to how great everything in the film turned out, including the visual effects, the promo really should have mentioned the CGI bear. For fuck's sake. ILM compositor Todd Vaziri has documented this as the VFX cycle of misinformation. And it goes something like this. Stage 1. The studio releases promos and interviews emphasizing the practical side of filming.
We had these physical locations. We had the real mountains, the real woods, the real river, the real snow. You dressed entire areas of the downtown, like Calgary and Edmonton, and a stretch of highway.
Stage 2. Online media demonstrates astoundingly horrendous journalism in a series of articles and videos stating how this show is different from other shows because they prefer practical effects.
Mazen insisted that the infected not be created with visual effects for fear of them looking cheap. He was dead set on using practical effects.
Stage 3. Viewers gobble up these articles and generate free hype for the show by raving about how good it looks, because it's practical instead of CGI, while literally talking about shots that are full CGI. Stage 4. After release, the visual effects studios release breakdowns that show the mind-blowing amount of great CGI used, but the average viewer will never know, feeling confident that they should continue to demand practical effects, because that's gotta be why this show looked so good, right?
Every shot that we shoot needs to be touched in some way by visual effects.
There's everything on this show, from airplane crashes to war-torn destruction in big city.
Alien Romulus is going through these stages as we speak. Stage 1. Director Fede Alvarez saying in interviews that all aliens had a practical puppet version, and he has this obsession with no green screen, and if you took the VFX out of the film, you wouldn't miss much. Stage 2. News outlets like Discussing Film take this to mean that all sets and creatures in the film are practical. Stage 3. Users pick up the bait and claim, finally a movie with practical effects. This guy gets it, for only the 17th time in the last year. The puppets and animatronics in Alien Romulus are being made by some of the best people in the world, and I have no doubt they're going to be absolutely amazing. But when your visual effects workload is so big it has to be split between all these visual effects vendors, I guarantee you that's a lot of no CGI. Since actors have no idea what goes on in post-production, it's easy to toss them at the press in stage 1 to talk about all the CGI they didn't use for filming. Because how could there be CGI during filming? It's not like the animated characters walk around on the set. Michael Keaton launched stage 1 for the upcoming Beetlejuice sequel simply by saying it had to feel handmade, which got sent straight to stage 2 by the media, and the users played their part by exploding into stage 3, generating free hype for Warner Brothers. I'm sure it will have stop motion and awesome practical effects, but the visual effects credits include CG generalists, 3D modelers, riggers, animators, and groom artists. Everything you need for CG environments and characters. So make of that what you will. Timothée Chalamet made similar headlines for Dune Part 2 by saying the worm he rides is completely practical, causing a similar response from the crowd. And of course there was a practical rig for shooting, and parts of it undoubtedly made it into several shots. But no, obviously that doesn't mean the worm he rides in the film is completely practical. Hang in there people, we're almost at the end. I'm just gonna bust some myths. CGI doesn't require skill, artistry, craft, or talent. Digital sculpting requires the same human talent and artistry as any physical media, as does all other aspects of CGI. Texturing a 3D object takes the same skill and attention to detail as painting a practical model. 2D animators, 3D animators, and stop-motion animators are all animators, and they've studied the exact same animation bibles on timing, weight, and movement. The old masters used the best state-of-the-art tools they had available to them at the time, and the idea that they wouldn't embrace new technology if they were here today is ridiculous, as seen in this historically accurate documentary from 1989. Anything fake immediately takes me out of the movie. Yeah, people who grew up in the 80s or earlier never had any such weakness. Practical effects and optical compositing really weren't usually as good as people remember them, but we didn't have a problem with it back then because we went to the movies for the stories. I can always tell when something is CGI. This is cute. What happens is, people will go to the movies and say, this is CGI, this is CGI, that's CGI, that's CGI. And they will look at their list and say, oh look, I got them all. I can always tell when something is CGI. This is confirmation bias, also known as the toupee fallacy. If you still think you can spot all the CGI, follow me around the room. This house is CGI. This house is CGI. This jet is CGI. The cave is CGI. This jet is CGI. These guys are CGI. These guys are CGI. Those guys are CGI. These guys are CGI. This line is CGI. This line is CGI. No, wait, that was the reference. This line is CGI. That jet is CGI. These cars are CGI. These cars are CGI. Those cars are CGI. And these cars are CGI. Actually, the entire bottom half of the shot is CGI. This jet is CGI. This snow is CGI. These jets are CGI. Almost all the cows are CGI. This hat is CGI. Michael Fassbender is CGI. And this dress is CGI.
Okay, are you making some of those up?
Nope, they're all real. Probably worth the Google.
When I said I was gonna save the best for last, this is it. In 1982, the puppet-driven film The Dark Crystal, directed by Muppet veterans Jim Henson and Frank Oz, opened to mixed reviews, but eventually grew a cult following. A prequel series premiered on Netflix in 2019, promoting itself on matching the look of the old movie by using these great-looking puppets. The project's director, Louis Leterrier, who is already famous on this channel with his practical approach to Fast X, presented the project with Jim Henson's daughter Lisa Henson at Comic-Con with these words.
I mean, listen, I love CGI, but we're not using CGI in this one.
Okay, let's hear what the show's visual effects vendor DNEG has to say.
Episode 1 draws us deep into the heart of this world, introducing us to many of these diverse landscapes and creatures. A significant number of shots required us to create a variety of CG set extensions, as well as several fully CG environments. It was decided not to build the orrery as a practical set, but to instead create it as a fully CG asset. Additional layers of detail were, however, implemented into the design, simply not possible with the technology and tools of 1982. A global team of talented artists and technicians created these visual effects in over 4,200 shots across the whole series.
But we're not using CGI in this one.
Weird. But maybe he was just talking about the puppets.
It's puppets, man, puppets. It's all puppets.
That's it. He just meant the characters are puppets. No CGI in the jets. I mean, puppets.
In addition to the environment work, across the whole show we also created around 50 CG characters and creatures, from digidoubles of hero puppets to original and bespoke full CG creatures. These were all modelled, textured, rigged and animated to emulate and integrate seamlessly into the puppet world of which they were a part.
We're enhancing here, there, things, racing rods.
Erasing a rod here and there, Louis is referring to rig removal, a great way to make more elaborate puppets and then remove the rigs in post, an option that films before the digital age didn't have. But this is not rig removal. These are completely computer animated hero characters that Louis Leterrier relied on to tell his story. Film sites like Bloody Disgusting reposted Leterrier's news that the show will be pure puppetry with no CGI. The article is still up, even though they should know by now how ridiculous it is. Check out the comments. Thank you. About time a movie does away completely with CGI. I would have boycotted the film if it was shot with CGI. Do you want to tell him, or should I? The highest praise for stunt people is if the viewers had no idea they were there, never realizing that the movie cheated and swapped the main actor with a stand-in. If the audience thinks Roger Moore did this, job well done. So why is this any different in visual effects? Why do you have to know that Top Gun Maverick has more visual effects shots than Black Panther? Simply put, you don't. If you thought these jets were real, these sets were practical, and that the racing scenes in Ford vs Ferrari and Gran Turismo were captured in camera, great! Hats off to everyone who worked on the film for collaborating on a great end result. When I saw Jurassic Park in 1993, I knew there were going to be some computer animated dinosaurs. But I saw nothing in the movie that reminded me of what I knew computer animation looked like. So my brain didn't understand what was going on. I had no idea where animatronics ended and CGI began. And to me, they were all just dinosaurs. If I'd seen the behind the scenes footage before I saw the movie, I wouldn't have been nearly as immersed in the film. So I understand the need for some secrecy up until a movie's release. You don't necessarily need to see what's behind the curtain. But it's one thing to just make your movie with CGI so good the audience doesn't notice. It's another thing to respond to the audience's "we want less CGI" by making your movie with a ton of CGI, but promote it as no CGI, causing the audience to think that's it, it's good because it's practical, therefore we want less CGI. And now the studios are caught in a no CGI loop they can't get out of. To the point where no one outside the movie industry knows anything about how movies are made anymore, because the behind the scenes footage itself is now visual effects footage that hides what actually happened behind the scenes. If you're fine not knowing how movies are made and just want to be entertained, that's cool. But if you do want to know, Hollywood isn't telling you. Make up your own mind about CGI. But remember, when a director says they like to get things in camera, when an actor says they didn't use a lot of CGI, when the media says a movie preferred practical effects, and when anyone says they can always spot CGI, know this.
That is one big pile of shit.
That's it. That's the takeaway. Thanks for watching.
What? I did not know 6 months ago that at the end of this series I'd have 75,000 subscribers and 2 million views. A heartfelt thank you to all of you for exploding this channel. Unless people continue with their no CGI nonsense, this no CGI series is over. But if you want to continue down the movie rabbit hole and get nerdy about screenwriting, action movies, science fiction, explosions, editing, then ladies and gentlemen, please do hit like and subscribe, because we are just getting started.